Scouts, everybody. Thank you for joining us this evening. I am Kusime from the Beaver Clan of the Haisla Nation. I have lived in many places throughout BC, and I want to acknowledge that the West Kootenay has shared territories of the Sinex, the Silex, the Chikwetmik, and the Tanaha. We'd like to thank SMG Endeavors for setting up the broadcast and the West Kootenay people who support the Wet'suwet'en for organizing this tonight. For those of you who haven't heard, it is live to Facebook and YouTube. It is also being recorded and it will be on Instagram. So this evening, we are here to listen firsthand without the filter of mainstream media from two guests who are Wet'suwet'en land defenders, and also to ask to support for them. I would like first to introduce Adam Gagnon. Would you be able to say a few words about yourself and then share your story?
Yes, I can. My name is Chief Dsta'hyl. I'm of the Delgamuukw clan of the Sun House there of the Wet'suwet'en. And there's five major clans in the Wet'suwet'en Nation. And we are one of them. We have two houses. We historically had three houses. We had the Owl House, Sun House, and Twisted House. But the Twisted House there, from all of the influenzas and smallpox in the turn of the 18th century, we lost a lot of people, like 80% of our population. So some of the houses and all of the different clans, there's some houses that completely died out. So, but they will be resurrected at when the right time comes, because the houses and the names are eternal. Basically, they don't ever disappear, once they're put into place. So what I would like to do is, first of all, I was told to kind of cover three subjects there in regards to the Wet'suwet'en and since colonization. And what I wanted to talk about, to give some context before I start talking about the difference between the hereditary system and the band council, is I'll have to put it into perspective. So what I'll do is I'll start off by talking a little bit about the history in regards to how we ended up in the situation that we are in. And the thing that a lot of the Euro-Canadians do not understand is, back in the late 1800s, they're going into early 19th century. That's when the federal government started making moves, to move all of the First Nations onto reserves. So what had happened was, in 1913, they created the Oliver Bill. The Oliver Bill was a really short bill that carried so much power. And all the bill stated was that in order, if any colonizers or settlers took interest in lands that is presently owned by the First Nations, it was up to the Indian agents and the RCMP and government agencies to move the First Nations off the land, so that the colonizers could, or the settlers could move onto our land. And they were very serious about that. In those days, the Indian agent, had so much power. If somebody refused to move, there was cases where, the head person was just shot right in front of the family, and then all the families moved onto reserves. So what had happened is this started taking place there, and using the Oliver Bill. And what had taken place there is, over the next 50 years, they managed to get pretty much all of our people onto reserves. And there was a few different First Nations people, that actually armed themselves and blockaded themselves onto their property. So rather than, them eradicating them, they just brought in surveyors and surveyed around them. And that's why we have these little pockets of reserves all over BC. And on the Wet'suwet'en territory, it was about probably about 7 or 8 small little reserves that was owned by individual family members that will not move. And so what ended up happening is they still remain today. But what had happened is when the federal government moved our people onto the reserve, what they told our people was, we will build you houses, we will give you food vouchers, and we'll give you water, and whatever you're going to need, you're going to have to want for naught. So this was the federal government forcing all of our people, into an entitlement situation. And now our people have been suffering from 6 to 7 generations of forced entitlement. They forced us into entitlements so that all of our resources on our land could be extracted by all of the different extraction industries, and the First Nations have never got compensated there for any of the resources off their territories. And what had happened is over the last 50 years, this kept on going. It never stopped, and even right till today it's still happening. You look at what happened with the Coastal GasLink project. The provincial government and with the federal support, talked to TC Energy and told them there that they should be only negotiating with the band councils, not the hereditary chiefs, even though it was the hereditary chiefs that did the Delgamuukw stay-away court case and had a favorable decision back in 1997. So what had happened now is the provincial government provided huge amounts of funding, to undermine the hereditary chiefs by using industry as their battering ram to push right through the Wet'suwet'en territory. And the provincial government had a duty to consult, as well as the federal government, a duty to consult before any major projects moved forward. So they only consulted with the bands, but they didn't even do that, in a very forthright manner. What they did was they went to the bands and they said that what we will do for you is we want you, to sign on for benefits there for this project. And they did not give them a choice. They said that the project is going ahead regardless, so that either you sign on and reap some benefits from it, or you don't sign on, the project's going to go ahead and you will not get any benefits. So those were the conditions in which they call, negotiations. When one party does not have a choice, they're forced. Their hands are forced, and they have no choice at all. So all but one band, accepted these benefit agreements. When they went to the Hagelget band was the only band out of all of them that did not, accept any benefits. They said that none of the bands have jurisdiction over the territories. And the head chief of the Hagelget band told them that you have to go through the hereditary chiefs because they are the stewards of the land. And all the band councils, as a puppet form of government for the federal government, basically have 2 square miles in each reserve that they govern and are in charge of. And they handle all of the administration funds there for, all of the social well-being of the community, as well as infrastructure projects. But all of it stays within that 2 square miles. The band council has no jurisdiction off the 2 square miles of, and I'm using square miles as opposed to kilometers because, when these communities were built there, they were surveyed off in miles. So this is the reason why I'm using the miles as opposed to square kilometers. So what ended up happening was this had taken place. So now, like I said, we've been suffering from 6 or 7 generations of entitlement. And, when we were doing all of these reconciliation talks there with the government, their idea of reconciliation is to say they're sorry and go on as business as usual. And what we've done is we're moving and building our communities back out onto the territories. And the Delgamuukw have reclaimed a very, very significant village site there that historically was populated there back in the early 1900s. And by, the 40s there, they were moved off of there and moved on to reserves. And so what we told the government was we're building this community, and this is what reconciliation looks like on the ground, is that we have to have our communities back and be able to start moving our people from the entitlement situation on reserve back out onto the land where we could exploit some of the resources that our ancestors did in the past. So this is what we're working towards. And, one of the things I would like to mention that's a little bit different than what I was just talking about is, we hired a lawyer and we entered into a climate action against the federal government as well, because they're not meeting the agreement of the Kyoto Accord. And what the Delgamuukw did is we debated amongst our clan whether or not we should do infringement cases or do a title case and we came to the conclusion there that a climate case is probably going to be the most comprehensive for us, because it covers, all of the destruction on our territories. You got all of the, our whole territory is basically a moonscape because of the extraction industries. You look at what Canfor and West Fraser did, and Skeena Cellulose over, the last 40, 50 years. Since the 50s there, they went into clear cut from selective logging and basically turned all of our territories into a moonscape. So there's really not a lot of resources left. West Fraser pulled out, and they kept a small project in Smithers, but the big mill they had in Houston they shut that down a few years ago. And then what they did is they did some tenure trading there with Canfor, so that Canfor will continue with their tenures, and then West Fraser took some of Canfor's tenures down in Williams Lake. So all of this had taken place, but the climate case basically is we hired Richard Overstall as our lawyer, and he's pursuing it. But what happened was the federal government and all of their lawyers put in an application to have the case stayed, and the provincial Supreme Court of Canada agreed with it, and so we had to do an appeal. And what the appeal, we're still waiting on, direction on the appeal as to, we were expecting it by now so that we would make an announcement, but that hasn't happened yet. So we're hoping within the next few weeks there that, the court is going to give us, some direction whether we won the appeal and start moving forward. So these are some of the things that we as Wet'suwet'en are working at. But when the hereditary chiefs did the Dsta'hyl Delgamuukw court case, it was one of the most unique court cases ever in the history of Canada, because it was the hereditary chiefs that had taken, the federal and provincial government to court, and the court case went on for years, because we started the whole process back in 1971. And, we ended up with, after a few years with the McEachern decision, who basically just totally disregarded all of the Wet'suwet'en's evidence and ruled in favor of the government. And when the McEachern case was happening, we ended up doing one prima facie case after another, for individual sites all over the territory. And the Gagnon and the Wet'suwet'en won every single prima facie case there that was brought forward. And still McEachern ignored all of that evidence. So when it went to the Supreme Court of Canada, all of that evidence was entered back in and was completely overturned by, by the Supreme Court of Canada. And even though the Supreme Court of Canada did not give us title for the land, what they did do was they said that the Wet'suwet'en is title and rights, predates the crown and has never been extinguished. So that that was the big decision. But they did not award us title because no colonial court has the power to give us title to something that we already have. So what ends up happening is it was bounced back, to the federal government, that they have to negotiate with the Wet'suwet'en on the land and, come to some sort of an agreement. But what had happened is the federal government and the provincial government, I'll go back a little bit there, because the federal government, what they did was they committed back at the time there in 97, $90 million, to implement Delgamuukw. And the Wet'suwet'en only spent 13 million of that 90 million. And then when the Harper government got in, they clawed all of that money back and they put it into their general coffers there to balance their budget. And we weren't the only ones that were impacted. They took from all of the First Nations communities, across Canada, as well as from the Veteran Affairs and many other people that needed it the most. And you look at Stephen Harper and the Trudeau government, none of those prime ministers acted in good faith, and they never acted like prime ministers at all. They simply acted as CEOs for big oil. And you look at these pipelines, they injected, $15 billion to date into all of these pipelines. So because the CGL pipeline is not, is owned by, 5 of the largest oil companies in the world. And they're all Asian companies. And the only partner in LNG Canada is the federal government themselves. So this is why they're pushing so hard, with TC Energy and using Coastal GasLink as a project to try to move this pipeline in. And the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs had unilaterally said no right from the beginning. They started back in 2003 when Enbridge wanted to build, and they said no. And then what they did is they turned around and they basically greenwashed the whole project and said it's going to be a natural gas pipeline. And but the pipes are not natural gas pipelines. Those 4-foot to 48-inch pipe are very thick wall, and they're capable of moving bitumen as well. And with all of the band's contracts there for their benefit agreements, they simply said that if ever a product changes and they start putting a different product through the pipe, then all of those benefit agreements were going to be subject to being revisited and renegotiated. So you could see that their intention, is not completely forthright. And we, as the hereditary chiefs, always knew that, because the government has never been forthright with the Wet'suwet'en. They've never been really forthright with the population of Canada. They've always, done things there that were contrary to what they promised. You look at all of the promises that Trudeau made there, and how many has he fulfilled? I don't think he's done many, other than the legalization of cannabis. That's one of the few that he's actually followed through with. And even that, from his projected date, it took over 2 years past his projected date for that, to actually be passed. So we have a lot of stuff that we have to deal with there. So in that regard there, I just like to say that, last year the United Church had a similar, webinar that I was able to speak on. all of these issues there. But I really appreciate that Erin and her family has did, what they are doing right now to give us, an audience there to be able to talk and tell our story. And moving from the last thing I wanted to talk about was when I went up into the Clore, and I went up there with Sabina and a bunch of other Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs and a bunch of the Giksan chiefs. One of the things that we did up there was we were going up to do, it was basically to show. We had a huge bunch of people, and we wanted to show them the devastation and the destruction, of all of our territory. It was one of the only untouched territories there that we had on the Wet'suwet'en territory, and there was no way, and it was always sort of designated there for wildlife. And CGL went in there. They built a road right alongside the mountains, and they crossed, hundreds of different streams, on really steep terrain in order to, have access to the area to build their pipeline, and completely disregarded all of the hereditary chiefs that said no, no, no. And what ended up happening is as a Leksamishu clan government, we talked about it last August, and, we couldn't, do what we did in the old days. There, our trespass laws back in the old days were, very serious. In the old days, trespassers, were giving one warning, and then that was it. If they came back again, they were shot, and the person that shot the trespasser would wear a red armband. And if anybody was missing somebody, they would go to the person with the red armband, and he would show them or tell them exactly where the trespasser's body was. And then the trespasser's family would have to spend years, doing compensation, for, the family there that, had the trespasser killed would have to pay, to compensate there for, the dishonor that one of their clan members had, dragged them into. So these type of things there that the Euro-Canadians do not understand there, that when we went up there and started seizing assets, we knew that it would not go over well if we ended up starting to, and plus, we would have been eradicated in a flash there. And that's what between the government and the police, that's what they wanted to do, is they wanted us to do something really radical so they could eradicate all of our people there from the land once and for all. But as Wet'suwet'en, we've always been peaceful people, and what we decided there is if we seize their assets, at least that'll send a really powerful message. And then what ended up happening is I was very forthright with the RCMP of all of the actions that I was taking. And what they turned around and did, they were sharing all of this information there with Coastal GasLink. And there was one of the security guys that was telling me everything that I told the police. He was telling me back to me, just reiterating it all back to me. And I told him, I said, yes, that's exactly right. And what ended up happening is, so the RCMP were obstructing justice. This was justice there that the Leksamishu clan government was exercising their rights on the territory and dealing with trespassers the way we saw fit, which was very passive. Nobody was going to get hurt. Nobody was going to be harmed. There was just, we wanted the CGL to move all of their equipment off our territory, and except for the ones that we seized. And, they had a chance. And now, the RCMP turned around and they arrested me, for theft. They said theft over $5,000. But yet they have yet to tell me, what did I steal? I didn't take anything. We took a few batteries out of some equipment, but there was no $5,000 worth for 4 batteries that we took. So I'm curious there when it goes to court to find out, what are they talking about when they're charging me for theft? So these are the type of things there. The RCMP is working completely for industry, and moving myself as a hereditary chief. I'm the fourth person in line in our clan. We got Smogelskam, Loamgun, and Zabisa, and then myself. We were at the present time, the highest chiefs in the clan, and I'm basically fourth in line as a wing chief. So these are one of the things there that I wanted to bring to your attention, is that me being arrested, will have to be dealt with, and it's not going to happen soon, but over the next few years we will have to decide, how are we going to deal with this. So what is going to happen is I'm going to be going to court in the middle of February, and we're going to have to make our plea, and the lawyer, my lawyers basically told me, he says there, then the judge will set a trial date sometime further down the line. And meanwhile, we'll just do preparation for my court case. And hopefully, everything will be, our lawyer is very confident in, us winning this case. And then since then, there's been some fairly high profile cases there that come forth, showing that the First Nations have every right, to exercise their own laws on their territory. So all of it will come out in the wash in due time, and we're just thankful for all of you, that are participating and are helping, and hopefully, that things will change. And I would like to see, like what had happened when, all of the band councils, signed on to this. One of the things that the hereditary chiefs did right at the very, very beginning was they said they were going to take the moral high ground, and they were not going to condemn them for signing on, because we knew the circumstances under which they were forced and had their hands tied to sign onto this agreement. So even though, it dishonored us quite a bit there that they signed on and started speaking against us, we chose not to, speak against them in any way, shape, or form. We just said we were going to stay on the moral high ground, and we're going to be taking the fight to Coastal GasLink and TC Energy and LNG Canada, as well as the provincial and federal government, as opposed to fighting our own people, because that's exactly what Coastal GasLink was trying to do by throwing millions of dollars around, because what they were doing was they were bribing other matriarchs and chiefs that had regalia. They weren't high chiefs, but they had regalia, and they were giving them up to $150,000, $70,000, to just use their regalia and speak, on their promotional videos. So, there's a lot of people, when you're poor, they give you $70,000 cash in hand. It's very, very easy for them, to, disregard, the hereditary chiefs that have been fighting, since the 1920s there, to get our land back. Because in I think it was 1925 there, when our hereditary chiefs sent our first delegation, to Ottawa. And at that time, they wanted to get an audience with the Queen, because the Queen was going to be visiting in Ottawa, and they never got a chance. They just sent a few low ministers there to talk to them and sent them back home again. And then it was done again in the 50s, where we had an audience there that wanted to meet with the Prime Minister. And the first time it was a priest that was going to speak on our behalf. And then the second time, our people knew how to speak English by then, and they wanted to speak for themselves, so they wanted an audience with the Prime Minister, and that never happened again. The Prime Ministers have never acknowledged, the Wet'suwet'en right from the very beginning. And you look at what's happening now, like Justin Trudeau is not, acknowledging the Wet'suwet'en as a people yet. And even though, they signed this Truth and Reconciliation, and they had UNDRA up there, and nothing is really happening. They, like I was telling you earlier, they think just a simple apology is going to be good, and they think that they could just keep on extracting and taking everything, that we've ever, everything that was ever sacred to us. The water is sacred to us, the land is sacred to us there, and like I said, our land looks like a moonscape there, so we don't have, any place to trap, we don't have any place to hunt. And then the provincial government over and above that said that they wanted to start culling cow moose, and we already have a really, really small population of moose there from the historical levels, and yet they still want to do, these things. It's just like what they did with the buffalo and what they did with, our fish on the Pacific Coast here. We're almost extinct there. We're up the Nanaka there. We used to have up into 800,000 to 1 million between the Nanaka and the Atna. And now we're down just to, like somewhere around 2,000, 3,000 pieces of fish that go up there to spawn. And it's not because we don't have the habitat. We have more than enough spawning habitat. We need escapement. And over the last 100 years, the commercial fishery with the mixed stock fishery has basically wiped out all of our fish. And the babine is the highest one because what the DFO did in their wisdom was they enhanced the biggest stocks on the tributaries, which was the Fulton and Pinkett stocks. And so now you end up with a huge number of fish trying to go up these tributaries. And there's 13 other tributaries around Babine Lake that's basically extinct as well. And what they've been trying is planting elevens in them to try to bring the stock back up in those different streams too. Very unsuccessful. So you look at how we've been impacted as Wet'suwet'en, and it's just not going to stop unless all of the Euro-Canadians start standing behind us and telling the government, give us back our 22,000 square kilometers. And just to put it into perspective, the 22,000 square kilometers in BC is 2.3% of British Columbia. And when you compare it to all of Canada, which is close to 1 billion square kilometers, we're 0.00037% of all of Canada. So when you look at our territory compared to all of Canada, all we are is like a little speck. And when you compare it to British Columbia, like I said, we're just a very, very small portion. And yet when you look at Arizona, that the Navajo ended up with over 25% of the largest state in the US, which is Arizona. And yet, Canada has yet to recognize our, title and rights on our land. Like the Supreme Court recognized it and said very clearly there that we have pre-existing title and rights that predates the Crown. And the government need only to recognize us and compensate us so that we could start administering, all of the resources and everything on the land, and try to nurture it back to life again, because that's going to take 100 years, from the devastation that the extraction industries have done, to bring all of that, to nurture it back to a place where our children and our great grandchildren, are going to be able to nourish themselves back off the land again. And I'd just love to thank you all, and I send all of my love to you. And if there's any questions, I hear that there may be some time in the end to do these questions. So thank you so much there, and I'll let it go back to you, and hopefully this helped a little bit. Thank you. And love to all
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chief. It's always an honor to hear from the people who are experiencing the day-to-day challenges for defending your lands. I have no words for the insanity of being arrested for defending your traditional lands, and it's humbling to have folks that can take that stand. I am hoping to see if Sabina and her sister are ready. Are they ready for us?
Yeah.
Sabina, and please forgive me if I mispronounce your name. Kumbayas? Is that?
Yes.
Oh, okay, thanks. Would you two like to give a little bit of introduction of yourselves and then share your story with us?
My name is Dennis. I am a Dsta'hyl woman. I reside in Syca's territory, and I am a supporter of all of my brothers and sisters and hereditary law. I'm Sabina Dennis Sahatni Luxilyu Dsta'hyl Nadleh Bank at Hasya. I'm here today in support of the Wet'suwet'en as well. We are of a neighboring nation, the Dsta'hyl people. Our lineage goes back to the Nadoten and Tlazten nations, but also even farther back than that. Our blood ties with the Wet'suwet'en are also within that. We have bared witness to a lot of the struggles in Wet'suwet'en territory, as we have a responsibility and a duty as Indigenous women to uphold our hereditary governance structures. And the reasons we do this is because it is designed to protect each and every living being truly on this planet. And within our structure and our governance system, each and every individual is accounted for and has a say and is important to be able to maintain a hereditary system and a clan system is that each and every member has a clan. Ours is a Caribou clan of the Luxilyu, and on our father's side, our father clan is Tsamatyu. Now, these systems have never been extinguished. We continue to uphold our feast hall systems in Bathlats, and as the Wet'suwet'en do, we sit in feast hall, our people, the Dsta'hyl, with the Wet'suwet'en, and share the same structures. We have Luxilyu, Damdenyu, Tsamatyu, Tsayu, and Tsayu. These clans are there to ensure that not only our people are taken care of, but our lands and waters. Because our belief is that everything that we use or take from the earth has to be utilized. Every bit of anything that we take out of the life circle has to be honored and respected at the highest level. Now, growing up as an Indigenous person, a Dsta'hyl woman in particular, and being raised with values that predate colonial values, it's something that's instilled in you, into your DNA, that you know not only our moral history is in alignment with these values, but also the natural world around us. And so I spoke just before we had this meeting, Sebasa, who is one of the high chiefs of the Laksamasiu clan, as Adam had mentioned, and his sister, who also has a chief name, Hagwell now. I spoke to them, and I asked them what's important to mention. And it's that if you take away our land, Antoinette said, if you take away our land, it's like we don't exist as a people. So our very blood and heart, spirit, soul is connected to the land, and our hereditary systems are formed from the land. The foods we eat are what we witnessed and observed the bears eat, and their medicines comes from the land. Our language, it comes from the land itself. So as we're going through these sort of cyclical events that keep on happening within our histories of the genocide and oppression of our people, it truly has to change now, and it is up to Canadians to really challenge the courts and the supreme justice systems of Canada, because enshrined in those systems is racism. If you look at the history of how Canada has somehow obtained some, what they call crown sovereignty over Indigenous territories here and all over the world, in fact, they are still relying on the same archaic and racist laws that were created in the 1400s. 1455, when some pope decided to create the doctrine of discovery. And this allowed them, by their own law, to consider territories, as long as they were not inhabited by Christians, that it was considered terra nullius, which means vacant land. And in this way, it gave them some sort of authority in their own view to march into areas like West Africa or North Africa and start slavery. Okay, and then when they got into the Portuguese were allowed to do that. And then they were also given that same right, because of the doctrine of discovery, to go and plant their flag down in Brazil. So this is all they needed to do to claim land, was go and plant a flag, bury some coins, or read a proclamation upon the lands which stated that they are now the sovereign owners of this vacant land. So through all these different court processes in the history of British Columbia, because we haven't had negotiations or treaties signed over here, we haven't surrendered or ceded anything or been compensated for anything. So somewhere in that history, 1763, around then, there was the proclamation, the Queen's proclamation, that stated that all the lands that were inhabited by the Indigenous people and utilized to sustain our well-being was to be never sold by anything other than the crown itself, and that we had the right to sustain and gather. So there's been a way in which Canada has used these archaic laws to date, to somehow assert their so-called crown sovereignty over our lands. And it really is up to Canada to look at that and see. And it's pretty clear to everyone and pretty obvious that that is the most racist and horrible thing that they could consider, that we are less than human. Anyways, my sister and I have traveled several times to Wet'suwet'en territory. We've been witnesses to atrocities that happened to date, including 3 militarized invasions by brutal force to arrest and take Indigenous people from off their lands, which is supposed to be illegal. And also we witnessed up with Dsta'hyl going into a pristine territory like none other you've ever seen, untouched, beautiful, sacred, like the land is like a child that you want to protect. That's how sacred, innocent. And with no regard whatsoever, they disallow the hereditary chiefs to even go and look and check up on the rivers, streams, the animals that they have to rely upon for their traditional harvesting. So they are totally not only acting immorally, but illegally by their own laws. They're not supposed to remove Indigenous people from their lands. They're not supposed to allow industry in without the consent and some sort of accommodation to the Indigenous people of those lands. And in the law, it doesn't say just band council. It says each and every Indigenous people has an inherent right to have that sustainable environment to live upon. So for them to not allow Tsebasa and Dsta'hyl and the Laksamassu clan members, all the other clan members that wanted to go through and check out the territories, that is completely illegal. And for them to not even consider negotiating an accommodation, that is completely illegal as well. Because as I recall, the Wet'suwet'en had offered, the chiefs had considered an alternate route, which is a part of accommodations and a part of that process, which CGL did not take a part of, or the government of Canada neither seemed to really want to accommodate, or else they would have considered that. So for us, when we're called upon by Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs, they sit at the highest forms of our governance structures, of our clan systems within the system. And so it's our duty and responsibility to go and witness what goes on. Our people, our Azatne, often have hired people from other clans and other areas to bear witness to different important events, because it's a part of our way that when we do something, there are witnesses. We cover our bases. So it's just really important that Canadians know that if you're going to bear the name a Canadian and be a part of the Canadian justice system and the rule of law, you need to understand what it means. You need to research and evaluate what we really need to accomplish for our children, because so far we can't even truly protect our children from impending climate catastrophe, from being swept up into the systems. And those same archaic laws enable Indigenous children to be removed from their families, from their lands in which they're trying to protect. And of course, as we know, had a huge part in the residential school systems and why they think we weren't human enough, so they had to humanize us by making us Christian. And so, yeah, we're all mourning. We're all in mourning here. Indigenous people are mourning because we all knew that those numbers were wrong. We all heard the stories. We all knew that Canada had been hiding what they had been hiding and what they continue to hide, which is a continued genocide and lack of respect and lack of even acknowledgement that we are a hereditary governance system that is capable and has sustained so much trauma and still upholds our hereditary laws. It is so sad. This day and age, with all the technology we have and the ability to get organized as a nation all across the world with the new technologies of like practically, it's like sort of like the new age sixth sense, you know, telepathic, where we can send messages. You know, this is in our realm of capability to organize at huge levels in order to reconstruct our societies. Like, we need to do a huge overhaul. We need to start supporting local economies and rebuilding these. And it's going to take all people. This isn't the work of the Indigenous people alone. It is incredible and beautiful that we've sustained this hereditary governance structures for this long, that now we could actually include and enact these in Canadian law. Because no matter what, if Canada likes it or not, our laws are enshrined in Canadian law. And that's why we keep winning. And we will continue to do so. But if the Canadian government keeps on trying to make these new laws that somehow supersede our laws or something, like being considered a freaking terrorist when you're an Indigenous person upholding hereditary values and laws, you know, these kinds of laws need to be challenged. The Harper Law. He's the one who brought in the critical infrastructure to be expanded to include pipelines. Okay? So we're not even terrorists, and they come at us with these military forces like we're like them or something. No. It's just wrong. And it hurts us. You think we like being out there? You think we like being a target and knowing that government is always spying on you? Your phone's always tapped and glitching. Have to buy a new phone again. You know, this stuff's real. Having cops around, you know, surveilling your house, coming into your house even sometimes. You know, there's accounts of people who have been spied on so severely by the RCMP in our area. And it's known to the Canadian public now. Yes, we are under lethal overwatch. When they come at us, even though we have no weapons. And it's known to Canadians that we are surveilled not for a criminal, because we have some sort of criminal intention ever, but because maybe we have some influence on the general public. And so now we watch the convoy of trucks heading around. That couldn't happen being Indigenous. That, I even fear for them, because Canada has prepared for and is preparing for the uprisings of all people, for climate and for the catastrophes that are seeming to snowball. And so they've got all these tanks and artillery right within the cities. Right in Edmonton, they have all these tanks. For what? To deploy on the people. Why? Because industry is more important and infrastructure is more important to them than life. And it's gotten out of control, so that these corporate bodies have become like evil entities where you can't even know where to take them down. It's like hidden. But I have great respect, I must say, huge, immense respect for the leadership of the Wet'suwet'en, of the Gitxsan, of the Haida, of all the nations that have taken up battles against the government to protect their inherent right to the lands and to the right to continue to live as Indigenous people. And I want to say that Frida Hewson and her family and her house group, what they did was what everyone needs to continue to do, which is to go out on the land and utilize it, because that's part of the law, is that we have to be utilizing our territories for it to be valid, or we have to prove that it was utilized before contact. So to be out there on those lands, enjoying what nature has actually nurtured us with for thousands of years, forever, and enjoying recreating a way to live on our Mother Earth. Because it's going to happen. We can't live like this anymore. And Indigenous people, yes, we're used to being impoverished. And that actually aids us in this all, because when the time comes when everybody's broke, we're used to it. That maybe we won't freak out. Maybe we'll be calm. Maybe we'll be able to find a way, as we always have. So we've got to work together. We have to stop looking at the differences. We're barely different. We're barely different from one human to the next. From one species to the next, we're barely different. From the trees, from the salmon. And I want to thank the Wet'suwet'en also for allowing me to stand beside them, to witness and to be able to assert ourselves, because we're not meant to be conditioned or powerless. We're born free. Our spirits are like that of the animals. They fly where they want to fly, and they howl when they want to howl. And, we got to take back those things that were taken away from us, because it's like a roadmap. of how to, all the things that the government made illegal for us to do are the very things that we need to get that back. So that roadmap, illegal, our Bashat system was banned. We had to go underground, and we did. It was illegal to hire a lawyer because they knew that we'd win. It was illegal to not send your kids to residential school. It was illegal. So it's showing what we got to do. We got to go to court. We got to fight it. We got to hire lawyers and go to court. We got to educate our children. And we have to include all children, because the system, the Canadian government, is not protecting all children, not even their own. So I'd like to say once again, the Wet'suwet'en have done a great service to us all, to humanity. All over the world, people look at this case and refer to it because that doctrine of discovery was used all over the world. And until the system changes, we'll keep trying, we'll keep fighting. And I don't mean fighting as in a way like we're up in arms like you guys fight. I mean like resisting the negative or the compounding systemic issues that are weighing us down. We keep resisting. We keep standing up, even though the load is so heavy to bear sometimes. Anyways, I'd like to just welcome people if they have any questions or anything for us, and for Adam, if Adam has anything he needs to add or say to what I've been talking about here. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Sabina. Yeah, I really appreciated that. There's one thing that you talked on, and you know, it is really important that you mentioned, you know, the desecration of all of our, you know, historical sites there by CGL. Yeah, I know you touched on it there, and yes, it was really devastating. And yeah, so just so that people know, you know, we've had so many historical sites that were completely destroyed or disrupted to the point there that it cannot be recovered. And this was in the wisdom of CGL, their idea, you know, to deal with, you know, when they desecrated the Gwees Trail, was everywhere that they destroyed the Gwees Trail, they just put a sign up saying that the Gwees Trail, you know, showing that this is a part of the Gwees Trail. And they followed that trail with the pipeline route, which is terrible. But I mean, these are the type of things that we're dealing with, and on our territory, you know, like Sabina said, it was so. You go out there, you know, and it's yeah. There's no words to describe, you know, the destruction that they've created on our territory. But and there was a couple other things that you mentioned there that was quite significant there. But yeah, I think it'll. I thought I was going to remember it, but sorry about that. Well, I don't know if there's any questions. Sorry.
Adam,
Oh, yeah.
I would like to ask you if you can tell us a bit about the relationship that the Office of the Wet'suwet'en has had with the Environmental Assessment Office. My understanding from reading the Dsta'hyl recently is that they failed to properly police CGL. Trap lines have been destroyed. You talked about other destruction, Perhaps you could talk a bit about that. And also, I'd be interested to hear you talk about what Sabina mentioned, which is the offer from the hereditary chiefs of an alternative route that went through pre-existing industrial right-of-way. Because I think that's really important for Canadians to understand that there are other right-of-ways that could have been used that wouldn't have destroyed pristine territory.
Yes, the alternate route that was provided there was along Francis Lake, which is a part of the Fraser watershed, and going through Utsa, which had been flooded, and coming out around Kamano, which would have been at least it wouldn't have disrupted, the watershed of our salmon. Like the route that they took going across, the Maurice River and then going up into the Gosnell and going across, all of the different streams there that are all salmon bearing. That was an atrocity in itself, where they could have went along Francis Lake and went all the way across out towards Huckleberry. And, they already, polluted a lot of the Utsa watershed, because what ended up happening was, that whole watershed was, when they flooded it back in the 40s, they didn't log any of it there. So, all of that area was completely polluted there with the tannic acid and everything. And, from the trees they're leaching, as well as, the flooded waters basically killed just hundreds of thousands of our migratory animals. The caribou mainly. Where back in the 50s, there was one of the biologists, that was working for Alcan, and he said in 6 miles back in the late 60s, as a biologist out of university, he said in 6 miles they counted over 500 carcasses of caribou that were caught up in, they would swim out and they would, all these windfall of trees there that were drifted to the shores. These animal carcasses there were found just hung up in there. They just reach exhaustion and die. And, it was just horrible, what had happened to our migratory animals that used to travel all the way from the Tweedsmuir Park all the way up into the Tultan country. So, Alcan shut these biologists down because, it was, they didn't want that getting out to the general public. So these are the type of things there that had taken place back then. So that was the route that the hereditary chiefs had offered, to CGL. But because when they got to the coast, in order to get to Kitimat, they had, it was very mountainous, and rather than directional drilling through the mountains there to get their pipe in, they chose, to go overland and follow our rivers and streams. So that was, the thing that, the people should be quite aware of, that yes, they were offered an alternative route and they just completely ignored it. Didn't even want to touch it. And forgive me, I forgot what the other question was.
I wondered whether you could talk a little bit about the relationship that the Office of Wet'suwet'en has had with the BC Environmental Assessment people who don't appear to be enforcing the agreements that have been made with CGL. I recently read an article in the Dsta'hyl that talked about all kinds of infractions in terms of existing rivers and streams. They haven't fined anybody. They haven't issued any cease and desist. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about that.
Yes, you're absolutely right in that regard there. First of all, the Office of the Wet'suwet'en has been, throughout all of this COVID, has been basically shut down. they haven't been operating there for the last 2 years, and if they are, they're doing the absolute minimal, and they haven't got the capacity, to deal with it. Like, the government does not provide enough funding for us, to deal with all of the paperwork that comes in, for and I haven't been a part of the office of the Wet'suwet'en, and when we were doing our enforcement, one of the things that David DeWitt from the office of the Wet'suwet'en told me is that they were not going to extend any services there to the Laksamishu clan, simply because we did not have two of our chiefs sitting at the table with them, and yet we are 5% owners of the office of the Wet'suwet'en. It was unfortunate there that that he took that stand as one of the disgruntled managers. And one of the things that we're hoping is that we could mend our differences with the office of the Wet'suwet'en and come to a working relationship there that would be favorable for them and us as well, because when the whole Delgamuukw court case had come forth, like the opening statement of Delgamuukw was that it was the house groups that were in the governance of the territory, not the office of the Wet'suwet'en, not the hereditary chiefs as a whole, but the different house groups and their clan members are the governance on those territories. And that was when we did the MOU with the provincial and federal government last year. They tried to get that out of there, and the hereditary chiefs refused to sign it, so they added it back in. So yes, the clans are the governing structure of each territory and the different house groups that belong to those territories. So that's kind of the long and short of it there. So in regards to the OW, it's just no capacity, absolutely no capacity. And then when there is, there's not enough will, that has to change. And I think it's going to be important there that, all of the hereditary chiefs, get together and, start organizing themselves, house group by house group there to deal with it, because the Unist'ot'en have been very, very vibrant, like Sabina said, and between Frida and her family, Warner Williams and Doris and Helen and all of the rest of the family, they've been so instrumental out on the territory. And when I was out there out on the Clore, they offered to help in any way they can. They brought us food and clothing and all the stuff that we needed out there. And then I look at Molly, and Molly has, she tried to help us in every way she could there when we were out on that short campaign as well. So it was unfortunate there that, Frida has been out there close to 15 years on the campaign. And I hear different people talking, like 10 years. That's not true. Like she was like 13 years before the COVID started, and that's another 2 years. So, she's been out on territory 15 years protecting the land and trying to stop these pipelines, because it started right at the beginning with Ambridge. And then Molly and Cody and all of the Get 'em Den, they've also been out there for the last 7 years. So, I'd like to commend all of them, for all of the wonderful work that they're doing, to, bring awareness all across Canada and the world towards, the cause of the Wet'suwet'en, and hopefully, that, all of the Euro-Canadians will, grant us their support, and talk to, all of their MLAs and all the government people that they are involved with. And it's important there that they just complete that MOU and recognize our title and rights on our territory. Mm-hmm. And that's the most important thing that we're looking at, and also to give us a compensation for, to build capacity so that we could start, our whole governance on our territory.
Thank you. I just see there was a question. Someone just logged in and asked whether this is being recorded. Yes, it is, and we will be posting and sending out a link to so that people can share this today with others after the event is over. Sabina, could you talk a little bit about the most recent arrest and the total disrespect that was shown to Slato in terms of the way the RCMP attacked her house? I understand it was then burnt down, and I also understand that people's personal possessions were put into a dumpster and then thrown over the side of a bank. Can you talk a bit about that so that the people who are watching from around Canada understand the kind of attacks that are being perpetrated by a militarized RCMP force?
Yes, I'd like to first acknowledge my internal vibration thinking about this type of invasion, and my spirit and everything. It's like the skin crawls with that genetic information, that that new organ that is the layer of skin, the fascia, everything. That ring of truth that holds DNA memory. So this is something that we've been through over and over, is complete disregard and disrespect for even our own bodies. And having that kind of force upon you, it's like having the fist of the system come down to as a display of force. And what I really felt was like tactical operations that are training zones is one of my observations of the progression of how they operate. So the most recent raid, there were 2 days of raiding happening. The first was November 18th, and that was on the Gidimden 44-kilometer bridge, Lamprey Creek Bridge, up in Gidimden territory. And on that day, we witnessed them coming at us with a brutal force of a military invasion. They had attack dogs, green army-looking police officers, like 20 or 30 of them, and 40 or so police in their regular RCMP blue. They came upon us. We met them on the bridge, which was significant to me because it started there. The invasion started there in 2019. So to be there again was, it was a powerful moment. They did not give us a chance to negotiate. We tried to negotiate with them. I tried to speak directly to officers and request the DLTs, which are the Division Liaison Team. And they just basically ignored us, seemingly about to deploy their Green Army upon us at any moment with attack dogs. So I started telling them, I got right onto the bridge and I said, we're here peacefully. We are unarmed, but we're powerful. And our Auntie Janet, everyone calls her Auntie because she takes care of everyone. There's some people who just take that role on, and she does. And she came down, our elder, onto the bridge with us, and the army, the Greens, were called back, luckily, and they deployed the blue soldiers on us in military formation in lines of 3, which I had never seen in previous raids. So they came in hard. They took out the media first. They had a strategy plan, and it was to make sure the world didn't see what type of abuse they were going to use on us, which they did. They took out the Haudenosaunee next and took them down hard. They had them in pain compliance and punches to the head, contorted every of their appendage. It was really concerning for me. I wasn't sure if they were suffocating one of the guys there. He was screaming he couldn't breathe, and I literally was ready to jump into the middle of that circle of officers, like 12 of them on one. Anyway, they arrested me next, and they contorted my arm into a pain compliance submission, which is something new to me, even though I had been arrested previously and I had never received that type of treatment before. So I feel like their tactics are getting a little bit more forceful, to say the least, but strategically forceful. So if you're a flight risk, or if you've resisted arrest in the past, you're considered a flight risk, and therefore they target you for pain compliance immediately. And I feel this was done to me because of my previous arrest in 2020. The next day, once they were done arresting us, they moved into 44 camp, where they arrested all the legal observers who weren't even on the road or in, breach of any injunction. None of us really were. We weren't impeding anyone, really. We're just people trying to negotiate peaceful terms out, which they had offered us in the past, and it should be a part of the law. Like Brenda Lackey, the head police chief or whatever, said that they're there to protect and make sure everyone's safe, and that they don't just go arrest people, that they offer a peaceful way out first, and they did not. So they arrested the legal observers, and some of them were subject to abuse by some of the Green military officers who decided to point their guns right in these beautiful women, right at their being. And so they hauled us all out. I didn't get to see what happened behind that line. I was already arrested. This is all what I got to see from some footage that I was able to see, luckily, so that I could understand better what happened. And then, as you know, the next morning, there were more arrests made as well. One was Cody Merriman, who was just observing what was happening because he saw and knew that there was an impending invasion going to happen to his wife, Molly Wickham, at the Coyote camp at 63 Kilometer. So they ended up to arrest him and a few others as well, who were also not in breach of any injunction and standing off the side of the road, which is part of the injunction. You have to be a certain amount of feet or meters away from the road. And so they continued up and proceeded to clear the road up to Coyote camp. And as everybody has seen on social media, they didn't wait for any warrant. They just broke that door down. What they did up there was just, like people always refer to it, it was like some kind of Shining Stephen King movie or something. And they refer to it like that because it's hard to describe that type of abuse. But I've heard it referred to as like when Canadians look at the news and see someone in China, as there's women in the little hut and all of a sudden there's chainsaws and axes breaking down the door. How does it make you feel? Oh, poor people. But it feels like sometimes like the Canadian, it's like some sort of cognitive dissonance that Indigenous women have been treated like we don't matter for so long that it's almost like easy to disregard it. And I'm not saying that I do, but I mean, that's what it feels like to me as an Indigenous woman.
Mhm.
And the complete disregard for their homes and their belongings is very typical. It's something that we've encountered in the past over and over. And it's not surprising to us, really. It's totally illegal. To remove Indigenous people from the lands is illegal right now as we speak. They break their own laws and get away with it, but that's why we need to fight these battles in court, because, you know, we will win. But they burnt the cabin of our beautiful little sister Jossie, and we call each other sisters out there because we are all sisters of this Mother Earth. If you're wondering why Indigenous women and men and a lot of different nations call each other brother and sister. So my little sister there, they then proceeded to go and terrorize them with chainsaws and breaking down the door of their with attack dogs, like lurching at them. And this is like the most gentle human, one of the most gentle, kind, hardworking young women I've ever met. Was's daughter, one of the younger daughters. And so to hear afterward that they had burnt it down with all their belongings in it, it just shows the level of respect and the message they want to get across to us. It's like sending a message, because they already adding insult to injury. They also, I don't know if people know, but they also bulldozed a beautiful cabin that my husband had gone out to build on the territory that was built off of the route, off, away, the right amount of meters away from the road, and they still bulldozed it. And that's a little home that somebody, Gidimt'en clan member or somebody out there could have used to stay warm, go trapping, you know. There's no reason for that to be done, especially when it's in dispute. When matters are in dispute, we should be in dialogue. We shouldn't be using these kinds of assertions against each other ever. We're like beyond that at this point. We're smart, and we need to push the government to honor that memorandum of understanding and get to the table with the Wet'suwet'en chiefs and include pausing on this project so that we can truly have meaningful consultation and meaningful solutions. And that's the way our people roll. When we have something that needs to be dealt with, it's dealt with in the Bashlat system, and it might take days, weeks, however long until people are satisfied. So I just want to say to Molly and anyone out there who is on the receiving end of those types of treatments, it is hard on you. It is hard on us. And we all take it different ways. Some of us have gotten PTSD. Some of us, you know, there's many different symptoms of after being treated in that way. And I don't wish it upon anyone, especially the future generations and children. So it's worth it to take the brunt when it comes to protecting children. It's our duty as mothers. It's our duty as clan members. So, thank you.
Thank you for sharing. I know that's very hard for you to do that. I have one last question. Would you both talk about what it is that ordinary Canadians could do most to help you at this time. If you could give people, we have people watching from all across the country, and I would ask that we close on that. What can we do to support you most at this time?
I think, you know, to put pressure on, like I was telling you guys earlier, to put pressure on, you know, all of the government bodies there that's in your area, you know, all your different, you know, they're in charge of their constituents. And I think it's important that, you know, that they have to hear from people there at the federal level as well as the provincial level, and not so much in, but in British Columbia for sure, you know, that, you know, it has to, the message has to be very loud and clear at the provincial level in order for us to have that MOU signed off on, so that our title and rights is recognized by, you know, the BC government, you know, because they cannot give us title, but they have to recognize our title over the 22,000 square kilometers. And like I said, you know, it's not a huge walk of land, you know, and it's very doable, but it just needs the will, you know, of the government to do it, instead of denying it all the time. Because that's one of the things that we're faced with all the time is, you know, when it comes to dealing with First Nations people, you know, they try to deny our rights as opposed to recognizing it. And that's been going on, you know, like I said, for well over 100 years. And it hasn't changed. It just means there that, you know, one of the things that I feel is we don't want our children and their grandchildren to be inheriting, you know, this treatment that we've been receiving from, you know, the provincial and federal governments. So I think, you know, to try to move us out of that whole entitlement situation there that we were forced into, I think it's more important that we get our land back and start moving the next 5-6 generations back off the reserves back onto their traditional territories. But we have to have capacity in order to do that. And I think the governments are going to have to, you know, start thinking about, you know, honoring, you know, their word, you know. So giving us their word and not honoring it there, that is, you know, I don't think it's, you know, something, it's not noble. You know, it's unfortunate. You know, like, you know, in the eyes of God, every single human being is, you know, is born in an essence of God. You know, our spirits, you know, is neither male or female, but yet it is in the essence of God. And I think that we all have to recognize ourselves as brothers and sisters, you know, whether you're Chinese Canadian, Afro Canadian, Euro Canadian, whatever you are, we're all brothers and sisters. We all share this planet, and we're going to all have to work together in the future. So I think it's important there that, you know, we start today, you know, not wait for, you know, that somebody else going to fix it down the road. But it's up to you as an individual, no matter who you are, you know, to start, you know, paving the way for the future generations. Thank you so much. Love you all.
I have one question now from Victoria King, who asks, what would be the daily land ceremonies protocols that you celebrate and participate in, and are any of these ceremonies being violated?
Well, I think all of them have been violated. You know, like the destruction of our fish, the destruction of all of our trees, so all of our, you know, hunting and fishing. So basically, you know, our food box has been completely disrupted and taken away. You know, so you know, all of that is very, very critical. You know, and you know, and things are not getting any easier, because the extraction industry, ever since 1997, had seemed to accelerate, you know, a huge amount. And right after that, you know, the Gordon Campbell government there deregulated. So what ended up happening is, all of these extracting industries, especially logging, they started logging right down to the lakes and rivers, and got rid of all of the riparians for all of the streams, and they just log right through them now. And that was all because of the deregulation, of Campbell, in his day. And the NDP did nothing, to start, regulating and policing industry. They've just let the extraction industry have a complete free for all. And then you got the oil and gas industry, that is, the Oil and Gas Commission, is a farce. They're given billions and billions and billions of liters of water, to the fracking industry. And once it's contaminated for thousands of years. And, you look at the carnage left behind, and all the places that they fracked, between all the wildlife and migratory birds there that get into their tailings, and they die, and then animals drinking the water, and then the people eating the animals, and they're dying, from cancers that are just beyond recognition. So these are the type of things there that the country has to be aware of. And we've been impacted, and it's not going to go away. Our fish, like I said, is almost non-existent. So we warned the federal and provincial government back in 1985, because I was the head negotiator there for the Skeena Watershed Authority at the time. And we warned them there that we are going down the same road as the cod industry and Eastern Canada. And we told them back in 1985 that the whole commercial harvest there of fish on the Pacific coast has to be shut down for at least 30 years, to give us at least 6 cycles of fish back into our tributaries there for building up our stocks. And DFO did not have the will, or the political will, or, the balls to shut down the commercial fishery. Yeah, because you have all of these big Scandinavian boats there, and they're worried about the pushback from all of these big Scandinavian boats on the coast that are impacting our mixed stock fishery. So these are the type of things there that, we've been impacted, and it's not going to change. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse until, like I said, the populace of Canada start waking up and fighting for the climate fight as well. Like I said, we've got we filed, in the Supreme Court of Canada against the federal government there for, the greenhouse gases there that is impacting us on the Wet'suwet'en territory. Because you look at the global temperatures have gone up 2 degrees, but in the Arctic, it's gone up 6 to 7 degrees. And you look at the melt ice caps melting up there, and it's just beyond belief there. Because and where is the will of the government? Where is the will of the people? All of this has to be addressed. So that's what I want you to do. Is I want all of you to, take note and start, talking about it at the dinner table with your families, and discussing how could you make it better. Because that's one of the things there that one of our old hereditary chiefs said years ago. He says, how we measure our success as First Nations on the land is how small of a footprint you leave behind. And that is how, our success is measured. And you look at the Euro-Canadians, and they don't leave a small footprint behind. It's all motivated by greed, and when is too much not enough for all these corporations? It's important there that the people start using their power as individuals. Because I like this one note that my late wife brought home to me one time. She had this little saying, and all it said is, if you ever think you're too small to make a difference, try spending a night in a room with a mosquito. Each and every one of us could make a difference. Just you have to be that mosquito and annoy your politicians and corporations. Okay, love you.
Thank you. Bonnie, over to you.
Thank you very much. Well, it was absolutely heartwarming hearing from the three of you, and without the filter of media, especially. For those who have stayed with us or who joined us midway, the speakers have offered a number of ways that you can assist, and we hope that you will lend your voices to the work that they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So are we signing off now?
I think we are.
Okay, and thank you again. I really commend you guys for taking the initiative to do all of this for us. It means so much to me.
Yes, I too thank you guys. Nachalya, ne nachalya. We really appreciate all the support and love that people put out there. Because what I was saying, what people could do in my mind, what people could do to help us is to really start to just acknowledge us as the title holders, because it doesn't take somebody to tell us we are. It's pretty obvious. We have our bodies on the lines out there. And one thing I'd like people to think about is challenging the police and considering police reform as a very important issue right now, because the KERG, the industry police force, is they're getting out of hand. And the last thing I would ever want is to see anyone hurt for defending and protecting beautiful, sacred ways of life. And that to respect our laws is to help uphold our laws, is a way you can help.
It's worth it to take the brunt when it comes.
So to help us to protect and uphold these laws are, like Adam said, we leave a minimal footprint. And that's our goal in life, not to obtain a lot, because a wealth is considered to our people like stagnant energy, and it can make you sick, just like any stagnant energy or accumulation within a body. And that sickness is greed, and people are sick. So what we need to do is to try to follow the laws that protect us from that. And it's do not waste. Do not take more than you need. Respect is one of the most important rules of them all. And if there was one rule and we had to say one, it would be respect. So Masif, to everybody out there for listening. And a big thank you to the hereditary chiefs, Sarazat, Denezat, Tekezat, Skyzat, who uphold these moral and ethical values in such a beautiful way, and to all the organizers for acknowledging the importance and urgency of these matters. Merci.
Thank you. Have a restful evening.
Oh, I will. Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay, love you lots.
Love you.
That was a lot longer than I expected.